Black history is often told as a story of struggle, of survival, of resistance, but that version of history is incomplete. Because long before oppression shaped the narrative, Black civilizations were shaping the world itself through wealth, knowledge, and power. This is not a story that begins in chains. It begins in influence. In the 14th century, one man controlled more wealth than any ruler in recorded history. His name was Mansa Musa. As emperor of the Mali Empire, Mansa Musa ruled over lands rich in gold, salt, and trade routes that connected Africa to the Middle East and Europe. At the time, Mali produced more than half of the world's gold supply. When Mansa Musa traveled on pilgrimage to Mecca, he didn't travel quietly. His journey included tens of thousands of people and camels loaded with gold. Along the way, he gave so much gold to the poor that entire regional economies were disrupted. Prices collapsed. Gold lost value for years. This wasn't legend. It was global economic power. For the first time, much of the world became aware that immense wealth existed in West Africa and that it was being managed by Black leadership. But Mali's true power wasn't just in gold. It was in knowledge. At the heart of the empire stood Timbuktu, a city that would become one of the greatest centers of learning the world had ever seen. Timbuktu was home to universities, scholars, and vast libraries containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. These texts covered mathematics, medicine, astronomy, law, philosophy, and theology. At a time when many parts of Europe were struggling through intellectual decline, scholars in Timbuktu were debating complex ideas and preserving knowledge for future generations. Education was not reserved for elites alone. Learning was a respected pillar of society. This wasn't a myth. It was a functioning intellectual civilization. And although much of this history was later ignored or minimized, it did not disappear. Because the foundation of Black excellence didn't end in Africa. It crossed oceans, and it adapted. By the early 1900s, cities were growing faster than safety systems could keep up. Factories burned, tunnels collapsed, smoke killed faster than fire. And when disaster struck, firefighters had one brutal reality. Once the air was gone, so were their chances. Garrett Morgan saw this problem clearly. In 1912, he created what would become one of the most important life-saving inventions in history, the safety hood, an early gas mask. Unlike others at the time, Morgan's design didn't rely on oxygen tanks. It filtered smoke and toxic air, allowing people to breathe long enough to escape. It worked, but there was a problem. America wasn't ready to trust a Black inventor. When Morgan tried to sell his safety hood, many departments refused, not because it failed, but because of who made it. So Garrett Morgan did something strategic. He hired a white actor to pose as the inventor, while Morgan himself pretended to be the assistant. Only then did officials listen. Only then did they buy the device. It was humiliating, but it saved lives. Then came July 1916. A massive explosion ripped through a tunnel beneath Lake Erie in Cleveland, Ohio. Poison gas filled the passage. Rescue crews entered and then collapsed. One by one, the situation turned hopeless, until Garrett Morgan arrived. Wearing his safety hood, Morgan entered the tunnel himself. He went in where others couldn't breathe. He pulled men out who were already written off as dead. 32 lives were saved. Newspapers covered the rescue. But even then, many refused to credit him. Still, the impact was undeniable. Fire departments across the country quietly adopted his invention. And later, versions of Morgan E.S. design would be used by firefighters and even soldiers during World War I. But Garrett Morgan wasn't finished. He looked at another deadly problem of modern life: traffic. As cars, horses, and pedestrians collided in chaotic streets, Morgan noticed something obvious. Stopping wasn't enough. Drivers needed warning. In 1923, he invented the three-position traffic signal: stop, go, and a new idea, a pause in between. That brief moment of warning would go on to save millions of lives worldwide. The modern traffic light exists because Garrett Morgan thought about human reaction time. Yet again, he sold the patent, this time to General Electric. And yet again, his name faded while the invention lived on. Garrett Morgan never became a household name. But every time a driver slows at a yellow light, every time a firefighter enters a burning building, every time someone survives because safety came first, they are living proof of his legacy. A man born in 1877, the son of formerly enslaved parents with little formal education, who changed the world by solving problems no one else wanted to see. Garrett Morgan didn't invent for praise. He invented so people could live. And that might be the most powerful legacy of all.